All right, I'm going to show you how to create an underwater effect by creating a panel that you can just drag across your game anywhere you want it, and it'll apply this cool wavy effect to whatever you're doing. Okay, so first things first, we're going to start with a Node 2D. It's going to bring this up for us, and then we'll need to add. I mean, if you have a game already, great. If you don't, we'll just add an image so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so I've imported my image, and I'll just drag that in here, and we'll sort of make it a little bigger. So what we're going to do to make this effect is we're going to create a custom shader, and don't be scared by that. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. It's actually pretty simple once we get into it. So to start with, we're going to need something to apply our shader to that's going to overlay on top of this image. So we'll just drag in the icon that comes with Godot and stretch it out over our image. And don't worry, we will make this look way nicer. So next we'll go over to material and create a new shader material. If we click on that, then we can start a new shader, and we'll just call this water shader. And then we can open that up, and this is going to give us this nice little code block here. So this is where all of our shader code will go. And if you're not familiar with shaders, I'll just run through real quick what each of these does. So the shader type canvas item, that just tells Godot that this is a 2D shader that we're using. The vertex function, so this gets called every frame for every vertex on the image. So in this case, we aren't going to be using this, so we can actually just delete this. And we're going to be focused on fragment. And so fragment basically focuses on every single pixel in the image, every frame. So as each pixel is rendered, this sort of tells Godot, like, this is how we want to render each pixel in the image. So to start with, we're going to need a couple of variables here. And so we can use uniform. We'll tell Godot to give us some options over here on the right-hand panel that we can set in the inspector, so we don't have to come into our code every time we want to tweak anything. And this is going to be a vector4, and you just vec4 is how you say that in the shader language. And we're going to call it color, and source color is what we're going to get from it. So this basically will create a color picker. And let's go ahead and, we have to save our scene here. So we'll just call this water. And so now over here under shader parameters, you'll see we have this color picker where we can choose a color. So that's what this uniform does. And so next we're going to need a couple more variables. We're going to need another uniform, and this is going to be a sampler 2D. And sampler 2D basically just looks underneath whatever we're talking about, whichever pixel we're talking about, and finds a value. So for this one, we're going to make noise. So fast noise is what we'll call it, and we want to use repeat enable, and that's going to allow the noise texture that we're going to create to be tiled over and over and over again. Because what we're going to do is we're going to create this noise texture, and then we're going to move it across the image to give us our waves, and so we need that to repeat forever. Next, we're going to do another sampler 2D, and this one we'll call screen content, and we tell it, hint screen texture. And what that does is it actually pulls the pixel from the screen. So below this panel, that would be our picture of the underwater ruins in this case. It's going to pull that in, and so we can use that. Next, we're going to go uniform vector 2. And for this, we'll call this speed. And for this, we're going to make sure that this controls the speed at which the waves move across the screen. So we can just give it some initial values, pretty small, because we don't want it to move very fast. And then finally, we're going to have a float called wave strength. And this will essentially just tell us how strong are our waves, how big are the waves that are going across the image. So if we save all these, you'll see now we have in our shader parameters all of these options that we can set up. Pretty cool. So let's start by creating some noise. So we'll go to New Noise Texture 2D, click on that. Let me open this up so we have a little more space. So for this, we're going to want to, under Noise, create New Fast Noise Light. And this is going to give us this awesome little inspector window where we can define what our noise actually is. And a couple of things that are important here. We want to click Seamless, and then we can bring that up to, 0.6 or so. And then we can click on Fast Noise. We want to select Cellular, and then we can go like 0.013 or so. Let's do that. Then under Fractal, we want to select, instead of FBM, we want to select Ridged. And this is going to give us just like a more, like a sharper sort of wave. So for the weighted strength, we can pull that up to about 0.75-ish, somewhere in there. For gain, we want to pull that up to about, around 0.98 or even 1. And so you can see here, it kind of is starting to look a little watery in the texture. So that should be good to work with for right now. Let's head back over to our shader code. And here we want to start utilizing all of these parameters that we have available. So down here in Fragment, we need to set up our actual shader code. So to do this, we're going to start with a vector 2, and we're going to call this UV. And the reason that you use the variable UV instead of this uppercase UV, uppercase UV in shader language basically says each pixel is at a certain XY coordinate. So what's the XY coordinate that we're currently looking at? And because we need to alter this, we're going to have to put it into a variable, because you can't actually change the value of the uppercase UV in the shader. So for this, we're going to go plus speed times time. And this is basically going to make our noise move across the screen as we render more frames. Secondly, we want to create another variable called noise. And for this one, we're going to use the texture function. And this basically just grabs a piece of the texture that we're talking about. So here we're talking about fast noise that we set up over in the inspector. And we're going to use our UV variable here. And we want to grab the red and green values from that. So we can save that. Now that we've got our noise sort of set up in here, we need to combine it with our color. So color is the output for each pixel that the shader is looking at. And so this is how we would alter the color that gets displayed here. So it'll be a vector 4, and we want to pull in from our color picker, color red, green, and blue. And then for our alpha value, since this is a vector 4, we're going to use 1. We can then add that to a vector 4 that's going to use our noise that we just calculated. So here we'll go noise X and noise Y, and then we'll just give it 1 and 1 and save. And now we're starting to see this sort of water effect come into play. So one more thing that we want to do now is pull in our underlying screen texture. And so for that, we're going to color times equals. We're going to use texture again to get that screen texture, or sorry, screen content. And then screen UV is going to give us the coordinates from the actual screen, not from our texture. We'll add in our noise that we just calculated. And then we're going to multiply that all by our wave strength divided by 100, and we have to do 0.0 because it's a float. Now if we save this, you'll see our image now all of a sudden has this awesome underwater effect. And so we can come over here and we can adjust, the speed to be, however fast we want it to go. We can make, the wave strength be more or less, if we jacked it up to like 10, it's going to be really strong waves. It's kind of hard to see. Take it down to 2, it's a little more subtle. And so you can kind of play with these as you like. You can also come back into your noise and you can change, your frequency. It's going to give you different sorts of vibes. Like if you want a lot of smaller ripples, you're going to drag that frequency way up. If you want bigger ripples, drag it back down. And then similarly, your gain and your weighted strength here, you can create sort of different effects, like changing the intensity of these ripples, and how much you see this effect happening. So you can just sort of play with that until you get something that you like, and there you go. You can now take this and you can just drag it anywhere on your scene that you want, and anything underneath it is going to have this water effect applied. You could also attach it to your camera or attach it to a UI canvas layer if you wanted it to just always be across the whole screen, no matter what, like for the whole level. And that's it. So you've now written a shader for an underwater effect in Godot. Thanks for watching.